excited to have you here today for the AAEEBL annual virtual meeting. Today in this video, we are going to be focusing on digital citizenship. And I am very grateful to have Dr. Mike Ribble here with me to share his insight on digital citizenship. And by the way, my name is Candyce Reynolds, and I am a board member of AAEEBL and a faculty member at Portland State University. And I am calling in from Portland, Oregon. And I would like to introduce to you Dr. Mike Ribble, who is, we are calling him in Manhattan, Kansas. Am I right?
Exactly. Thank you, Candyce. I appreciate you having me join in and having this discussion today.
Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Mike. Mike is the author of several books, one that has been quite influential in my work already in thinking about e-portfolio pedagogy in higher education. It's a book that's in the 3rd edition. It's called Digital Citizenship Handbook for School Leaders, Fostering Positive Interactions Online, Digital Citizenship in Schools. And he has co-authored that with Marty Parks. He's also written a book called Raising a Digital Child. In his latest book, and the book that has influenced me, he has focused on increased knowledge of appropriate interactions with others through a digital experience for educational leaders. He's worked within the education field his entire career from K to 12 to university level, and he provides a holistic perspective when working with educators. I'm really, really pleased that we can invite Dr. Ribble into our community and learn from him today and beyond. Let me tell you a little bit about how we're going to set up this meeting today. One, I'm going to ask Mike some questions about his work in the context of the issues that we are facing today. And then I'm going to ask him to share some of his work on digital citizenship that will hopefully whet your appetite to learn more and come to our conference face-to-face next year in July 2021. But also I encourage you to check out his work both online and in his book. So with that, let me ask this question of you, Mike. You know, the theme of our conference is doing it right and doing e-portfolio work right. That as we begin to face this pandemic and our increasing awareness of racial equity in our schools, we on the board begin to think the other really important question is not only just how to do it right, but also thinking about doing the right thing. And I'm curious your perspective on doing the right thing and how to do it right around digital ethics in this environment.
Well, thank you, Candyce. I was very excited to have been asked to be a part of this and now be a part of this virtually. When I was at the university, I did some work with the portfolio group that we had working, and this was back in the early 2000s. So we were spending quite a bit of time both in the college that I belonged to, but also university-wide in discussing the portfolio piece. So I would say that that those discussions helped to form some of the ideas as I was working on my dissertation work in this field of digital citizenship. So as I begin to think about, you know, how do we do the right thing, or how are we, you know, doing it right, is really setting a foundation of what are the right things to do. How do we begin to identify what that is? And as I began my work and I did my research in digital citizenship, it was really setting these foundational pieces, which I call my elements. And I have 9 elemental areas that what I saw were the main focal point of who you are inside of a community. And no matter, whether it's in this portfolio community, or if it's at a university or in K-12, we're all striving to help our students and help them to see the value of what they're doing. And now, as you said, in this time of a global pandemic, things have changed, even at our level, at the K-12 level, of what does it look like? What does education look like? And how can we begin thinking down the road? Because we've had these technology tools for going on almost 30 years now, and it keeps ramping up every single year. We're seeing more and more changes, and this year was definitely one of those banner years. So going back to the original question, how do we do things right? We have to think about others when we are working within these tools and resources when we're online, because it is a community. It is a citizenship of people that are working, living, playing in this digital space. So we have to be very, very aware of everyone. And, some of the early talk in the digital space was, it would become almost colorblind because, everybody is equal. But we know that those things aren't true. We know that there are still digital divides in many of our different populations. And we at the K-12 level are trying to identify those areas and try to provide as many equitable resources as possible. And so one of the areas, one of the elements that I talk about is access, and making sure that everyone has that ability to be able to bring their ideas, their information to the space that we want it. And so, when you're talking about, a portfolio system, you have to think about your users as well. Who's putting that information out there, and can they get to the data and where you want it to be placed? And do they have the tools? We're finding that a lot of our users are using, as basic as a cell phone. Does your platform, does your path allow for that to be done? So we can't just think of it as, okay, we've put together a really, really nice tool and then that's enough. But we have to think about, can they get to the internet to be able to access it? Because most of it is in a cloud system or some other space that is a shared space. So it has to be out there. So, that goes into, again, into access, but also into communication. Are we able to share the same language of what we're doing and how we're supposed to do it? Because when it is in this space, some of our language piece gets lost, and we have to be able to understand what I'm putting there and you're putting there, and making sure that it makes sense to everyone as we build this, because we are trying to build a consortium of data, of information to be able to share. And that's the real idea of a portfolio, is being able to place our best selves out there and be able to share it with others. And that's, the hope that we're trying to reach. But my elements, talk about those different areas, whether it's etiquette, going down the ethics piece. So, how do we treat each other? Because, we are all members of this community, all part of this society that we belong to. Everything from, the, you know, the literacy piece and being able to understand, what am I supposed to put there? What does that mean? And being able to share those pieces. So it's really about the entire community. It's really about understanding and being empathetic to those that are around us, because we can get very myopic sometimes within our digital selves and only see certain pieces. But I think that having the communication, having the resources, the tools to be able to share and to be able to expand that really opens us up to understanding more about what other people's experiences are, because we are different, and we have to start from that perspective, is that we all come from different backgrounds, different understanding, knowledge, whether it's ethically or in our own society, our own grouping, or maybe it's just becoming more knowledgeable about the tools of the resources that are out there, because there's been discussions of there's even a digital divide sometimes of those that are a little more experienced than some of the others, and maybe they don't understand the tools that we're trying to provide as well. So it's not just socioeconomic, it's not just gender, it's not just whether you're living in a rural or a populous area. It's all of those pieces and how we can work together. And it's really about understanding and empathizing with everyone that's inside of that bubble.
I really like that perspective of focusing on community and figuring out how to communicate, us to communicate with our students and with our colleagues, our students and how they are able to communicate with us. I really like that focus.
Thank you.
And I like, one of the things I like very much about your work is that it really is a holistic perspective on looking at our digital environment. And in building e-portfolios, I think on our campuses, many of us have, sort of thought about our learning outcomes and what we want students to achieve. But we actually haven't always thought about what are the other things that students need to be thinking about and learning about while building this digital space that represents who they are and or allows them to explore their own learning. And that's where I think your work really adds to our ability to be able to think about our work more broadly as well as more deeply.
Thank
So
you.
with that, maybe we can have you share a little bit, give us a teaser about what people would have heard if we were able to hear you this at this time in our face-to-face conference, and what they can hear next year.
Certainly.
Go ahead and share your screen and
I
tell
will
us that.
share this out, and I do have to, as you mentioned, I have to give a shout out to my co-author of this last book of the Handbook for Leaders. Marty Park was very integral in a lot of different pieces that we were working on. I've known Marty for a lot of years. Marty is the CIO for the state of Kentucky, so he sees the entire K-12 at all levels. But he brought a great wealth of knowledge to this process, so I have to give him a lot of credit. But as you mentioned, this has been sort of a labor of love for me for a long time. I've been working in this field of digital citizenship for going on 15 years. So it's interesting that some people are just now hearing about it, but I feel like it's been a long time coming just to get to this place. So it's exciting to hear more groups, more interest, and what I find most intriguing is the globalization of it, and the number of people that I hear from all over the globe that are now talking about digital citizenship. I hear from graduate students from across all different continents asking about, where did I start? What was my background? How did they get started in this? And so it's just great to see this, but it's been definitely a building process. So in this new book, what we tried to do is tried to capture this this S3 foundation, and what the S3s were is about is it's a building process. So we really, as educators, started to step back and say, if we were to teach this as a curricular area, English language arts, social studies, any of the areas, how would we do that? How would we share that information? So we came up with these sort of three big buckets that we kind of came up with. And we came up with this safe, savvy, and social idea. So a lot of people, when you do research on digital citizenship, they're going to talk about the safety piece. That's usually the first part. Don't share your passwords. Don't do those kinds of things. So it's more of a sort of 10 commandments kinds of thing. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't go here. Don't. But when we talk about safety, it's really about what we should be doing. How do we do things the right way? And being aware that there are issues that are out there, but really, how do we help ourselves and then build on that to help each other? So we see this as sort of the base foundation. And as we begin teaching, we start in this safety idea in each of these elemental areas. And then we build on to it into the savvy. And savvy is just becoming more intelligent, more understanding of all of these resources. So, it's starting to build and understand the different tools. So, just as a word processor or a spreadsheet or something. So we build on that safety piece. And then we see the pinnacle as the social piece. Once you've understood and are understanding about the safety and understanding about the resources and tools, then you can move into the social aspect and really become full members of that digital society. And I think sometimes we skip over the first two and we jump right into going on to social media and being a part of those. And those are wonderful aspects of being able to communicate and interact. But without the basis, without that understanding, it's really not a fully formed knowledge. It's almost like asking someone to write, a short story if they really don't understand sentence structure. You really have to have those basic pieces to begin to build. And as you move up, then you can realize that. So we are looking at it almost in a pyramid hierarchy type of mentality. So that's how we see our students moving through this process.
Can I ask you a question
Please.
about that? So these three areas, you in the settings that you have worked in primarily, you're integrating this into the curriculum.
Yes.
In a variety of different areas. So it's not a particular class about digital citizenship. It's really embedding it in your practices and teaching already.
We see
Right?
this as a part of the curriculum, that it has to be in part of it. So that's how we've tried to write some of these books. When the previous books that I've done and this one with Marty is really, how do we embed that? And as a teacher, as a professor, I have to understand what that means and where do these things fit. And again, I think sometimes we as educators think that that's somebody else's job, that somebody else should be taking care of that. And we have a lot of students that are coming to us that have had not the foundational pieces even in their own homes, even though they may have been surrounded by technology. I mean, the survey results from our 0 to 5 are saying in the United States that over 50% have touched some sort of technology by age 5. So by the time they reach us in education, they have already been fully integrated. So you mentioned my book, Raising a Digital Child, and I have a whole chapter on parents, parent Ps in this latest book, is really getting them to understand this as well, because they need to do it before they go to the students go to school, but also they need to be mentoring them, and they are also,
themselves.
yes, and they need to do it for themselves, but they are also becoming role models for those children. We try to say, do as I say, not as I do mentality, but they watch us. Children watch what adults do, and they will, they'll follow, what we do. So,
I
it's
think that's
really an
true for,
understanding.
I'm sorry, I think that's true for professors too, that our students are looking to us.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
they want you to lead them, and you're setting those foundations, even with your portfolio piece, is you're setting the parameters of what that looks like. And then, but you need to answer the questions: what if I wanted to do something else? What if it doesn't fit inside of this box? How do I express what I want, in this format? Because sometimes, the box can feel very constraining. And in this day and age now, we don't want to be constrained. The world is our foundation, and there's so many options that are available. So,
Okay. Thanks for that discussion.
but we've done a lot more research. Like I said, I've had a wonderful opportunity to be able to communicate with folks from all over the world, and in this latest book, just to let you know that there is a whole chapter of global pieces as well, and some in higher ed and some in K-12. So there's kind of a mix, and I actually from South Africa is actually someone from the health industry was willing to do some survey pieces as well. So it's really seeing this from a larger perspective, like you said, that holistic perspective of not just elementary, middle, high school, or higher ed, or anything in between. Because as you said, even our parents, in our homes, they're learning these, and as things change, I'll tell a quick story. My brother has 2 children that are in the high school realm, and he knew nothing about Zoom, knew really nothing about that. But he works for a global company, and he figured out, how to go out, gather information, and learned about it. And he also learned their learning management system. He went out and gathered data. So he had to learn things that were really outside of his purview, because as we grew up, I mean, he's 4 years younger than I am, but we never had those experiences. It was not part of our background of what we did. And even talking to another colleague, Dr. Jason Oler, he was up at the University of Alaska, and he was part of the first groupings that actually did use modems to send information back and forth. And they used to do everything by distance. So you'd fill out, all of your information, you'd stick it in an envelope, and then you'd send it back, and so it took weeks, because they'd have to send it to different places up in Alaska. And Alaska's a pretty big state. And getting things, by plane or boat or whatever. So they went from weeks down to hours, even though it took a lot of hours, even for the, data to come across. It was like going to the moon. It was, the difference between, having a horse and buggy to traveling to space. It was that drastic.
Mm-hmm.
And that was only in the 1980s.
Right.
So it's not like we're talking about, 100 years ago.
Right. And
We're only talking 30, 40 years.
Exponential growth since then.
Yes. And, it continues to go through that cycle here in the last even decade. It's been going. And so it continues to change. So it's just exciting to see how even our parents are starting to change and move with this. But, there are some growing pains that go along with this. And our students are showing us that as well. I think the biggest part that I do want to share, and I'll show a piece of it just in a second, is the progression chart that we came away with out of this last book. And this was really about the understanding of how we can really see this walking through of the different levels of the digital piece. So it's being able to see all of that piece of how do we go from where we were, and how do we expand upon that as learners. And that was a big piece of what Marty brought to this, was how to see all of this as not just a one level, but in multiple levels, and being able to see it within this space of being able to, to be able to work it through the different curriculums. And like you said, that we can, be able to, let me gather my thoughts for just a second. I'm sorry. Sorry for all the people that. So the progression chart is really about, taking this idea and integrating it back into the curriculum, because it's an understanding of that it is like any other curricular area. How do we learn? How do we best take this information and take it from just as a topic? Like you said, we try to put it in this box of, well, let's teach computers, or let's teach, whatever that, topic may be, and, focus on that. And we're saying, let's see this across the board. Let's see this in all. So when we take this progression chart, we show the elements down the side. So in that first little bubble, we're looking at the different elemental areas. So we have all 9 elements. We talk about digital access and commerce and rights and responsibilities and safe and security. So they're all going down the side. And you can see this all on my site, and I'll show that here in a second. But then we take that into the S3 piece and start to say, okay, where do we want to focus these topics? The safety has to be there, but we don't want people to forget that safety changes with us as we go. So, when we're a child, we want to make sure that we're looking both ways when we cross the street. Well, we don't want to lose that skill, but we also want to be able to move forward. So when we begin to drive, safety takes on a whole nother level. And the same thing in the digital world. It's not just we learn all the skills, all the ideas of being safe in digital access. It's, being able to understand, how do we share, and how do we help each other, and how do we, use the resources, but then how do we move those forward? How do we really see them as a high schooler or a university person or out in the community, and begin to draw this through and see it across? So we've broken it down because, we're really focused in the K-12, but, it could be continued to be expanded, because this is actually in a a Google a spreadsheet that's available for anybody to download. And you can expand that and continue to take these ideas further and further and further out. And then what we also tried to show is that these ideas cross each other. And so it isn't just access by itself, but it could be etiquette, it could be rights and responsibilities, it could be a lot of these ideas as they fit together and be able to show where they go. And then we then also put it into what other areas in the curriculum. So if it's, you know, communication, but it also might be social studies as well, depending on what topics that we're talking about. So it's really an amalgamation of all of these and helping our educators to better see that, because I think sometimes we don't always understand where these all can fit, where they all can meet. So we're trying to help. This isn't by any means the end all be all, but it's a starting place for people. And then how do we then take it, you know, through Maslow? How do we begin to apply it? How do we analyze it? How, you know, how do we take it up the chain so that we can see that our students are expanding that knowledge base, that they are taking it beyond just a one level idea. And I think, again, sometimes we try to, you know, we try to slice this off and we try to make this, you know, one dimensional piece. And when we turn it, we start to see that it has so many different facets to it. And that's what, you know, like I said, for 15 years, you know, you always think you're going to find sort of that end point, that, you know, that top layer, but it always keeps coming around. And as it changes, so do these ideas. And, you know, we've done some updating, some refreshing. So if some people have seen some of my work early on, it's changed a little bit. I mean, the foundations are still there, but, you know, we've tried to continue to move with the ideas that are going on within our curriculum, because it isn't static. And I think that as educators, we have to understand that, you know, these tools, this technology is it is changing us. It has changed us. And I think that with this pandemic, I think it's even going to be even more so. I think we're going to find that, do we have to have all of the meetings that, you know, we had face to face, or can we do it virtually? Can we, you know, do it in a way that's safe, but also meets the needs of communication and literacy and knowledge and all of those pieces, and take us to that next level? Now, hopefully we won't get rid of all the conferences and won't have, we will still have some of that interaction, but, you know, I think that there's a new opportunity for us to look beyond what we once felt was sort of, you know, the end all be all. And now we're going to see it on a little bit different level. We're going to see it a little bit more expanded than we ever did before.
That's great. I can't remember if your slide actually talks about those 9 elements.
I did not put that in this slide deck. I kind of left that. I have the link on my last slide that you know, identifies, and all those elements are on my website, and you can definitely go out there and see them. The full progression chart, as it shows under DigCit Life/progression, you can download it. It has all 9 elements in it, and the safe, savvy, and social in all of them as well. So it's a fairly large document, so it's a little hard to see on one slide, but it's all there, all the information, and as you said, you know, the definitions and the explanations are all within the website, and within my books. They've always had the elements within them, because it's always been that sort of that basis that I always came back to. And it was always that structure that kind of allowed us to build upon. And that's what people have liked over the years, is they've liked those elements, they've liked that. But in this slide deck, I don't have all of them listed, but
I just
maybe
want,
the next time we have a discussion, we can
yes,
share.
you could share that. That would be great. I want to point out to the listeners that I really found those 9 elements to be very helpful in higher ed. When we think about building e-portfolio programs, I think looking at that list as administrators would be very, very helpful, and thinking about what are the things I need to consider. And also as instructors, working with students on e-portfolios, or any other folks that are working with students on e-portfolios, to look at those elements and see opportunities for how you can enhance their learning and doing them through those 9 elements.
And here is all the contact information. As I said, my main website is digitalcitizenship.org. It's been there for over 15 years. There's little bits and pieces of some other people's research, some other ideas, but a lot of the things that I've worked on, and there's some communication videos and things that I've done here lately, especially around the pandemic, talking about digital access especially, has been a very hot topic. So been kind of focused on that, and trying to help people in this change, because we're living it too. We're dealing with, how do we get the resources, how do we get the connectivity out to our people, and that's a pretty huge aspect of what we've tried to do. So my email address is there, Twitter at DigCitizen, and then I do have another piece that I also do. It's called My Digital Experience. It's a little bit of a mix of different things. I've also tried my hand at some fiction writing. So I've written a fiction book, and it's listed out there, and it ties into the ideas of the safe, savvy, and social as well. So it's sort of a more of a young adult fiction, but it was a nice departure from what I had done in the past, and always willing to try new things, and share out new ideas, and trying to work with as many people as possible, and really make this, as I said, a global piece that we're really trying to share out, and how do we help each other.
That's wonderful. I really appreciate you spending time with me today, Mike, sharing your ideas, and actually, I think, introducing us to these ideas and helping us think more about how we can use it in our own context.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Okay, and on Wednesday, we'll be asking Mike to join us again for the discussion. So please consider joining us on Wednesday to ask more and to hear more of Mike.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. See you all soon. I'm going to stop the recording now.